everybody. Welcome to our first of two panel discussions that are going to be held this semester on the 50th anniversary of the Master Plan for Higher Education in California. As you know, Long Beach City College is one of over 100 community colleges in the state of California. As part of one element within the broader system, which includes 10 CSUs, Cal State universities, as well as, 10 University of Californias and 24 Cal State universities that make up the higher education system. Today we intend to take a retrospective look at the state of the master plan for the higher education in California. On May 5th, our plan is to return for a second panel discussion we are calling Reimagining Higher Education in California. And we'll be announcing when that is and all the details of that to come. My name is Kevin Ryan. I am the Academic Senate President here at Long Beach City College. I also teach math when I get around to it, which is my first passion, of course. I actually am a result of the California higher education system. I went from preschool all the way through grad school in Long Beach, California. I went here to Long Beach City College in 91 to 93, and then 93 to 95, I was at Cal State Long Beach, and then I got my master's there eventually as well. I would like to thank Dr. Julian Delgadio and Mr. Paul Savoy, who is from the Department of History and Political Science, and Mark Taylor of the Campus Public Relations for the efforts to initiate, arrange, and promote this event. We could give them a round of applause to thank them for this. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce the individuals that we have here. Our first panelist hardly needs an introduction, Mr. Tom Hayden. He spent 18 years in the California legislature, where he chaired the Assembly Higher Education Committee and conducted hearings on the master plan. He led the battles against increasing tuition and costs. He received Lifetime Achievement Awards from Cal State and UC student associations. Before serving on the legislature, Tom was a civil rights and anti-war organizer who was put on trial. I did read that correctly. He was put on trial by the Nixon administration for protests at the civil rights and anti-war organizer who was put 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago. That's kind of cool. After leaving the legislature, Tom returned to his roots in the anti-war movement and founded the Peace and Justice Resource Center in Culver City. He teaches at Scripps College currently and is the author or editor of 17 books, the latest of which is The Long 60s, by Paradigm Publishers. Our second panelist is Mr. Eloy Ortiz-Oakley. He is the superintendent president at Long Beach City College, for the Long Beach City College Community College District, a position he has served at since 2006. On the Long Beach City College website, Eloy Oakley is described as a true community college success story. After graduating from Catholic school and 4 years in the U.S. Army, the Southern California native attended Golden West Community College. President Oakley went on to receive his bachelor's in environmental analysis and design and his MBA in business administration from the University of California in Irvine, making him a complete product of the California system of higher education. He was appointed superintendent president of Long Beach Community College District after 4 years as Long Beach City College assistant superintendent, executive vice president of academic services. Before joining Long Beach City College in 2002, he was the Vice President of College Services at Oxnard College, Assistant Vice President, Property and Casualty Division of Keenan and Associates, and the Manager Risk Services at Coast Community College District. Mr. Oakley was also an adjunct faculty member teaching in and coordinating the Environmental Technology Certificate Program at Golden West College. And apparently he liked it so much, this entire higher education system, he's never left it. Our final panelist is Dr. Craig Hendricks. He's been a member of the Department of History and Political Science at Long Beach City College since 1979. I won't say how old I was. Especially the history of Brazil and Mexico. He also teaches various history courses at CSU Long Beach. He has been a Fulbright scholar, published 4 edited textbooks, 2 world history textbooks, and a half dozen articles for history journals. He is currently co-director of his second teaching He's currently the co-director of the Second Teaching American History Grant with colleagues from Long Beach Unified School District. Like President Oakley, he is a product of the Master Plan for Higher Education in California, having begun his college career at Long Beach City College in 1966 to 68. He earned a bachelor's degree from California State University Long Beach in 1970. He earned his master's degree and PhD in history at State University of New York at Sunnybrook. Incidentally, while a student at CSULB, he was chairperson for political open forums, and in April 1970 arranged to have Tom Hayden speak at the campus, reminding us how small the world it is. Greg is currently working with colleagues from the social sciences on a community study of Long Beach over time through various lenses of social and economic activity. Please welcome our three guests. As I stated before, 2010 is the 50th anniversary of the Master Plan for Higher Education in California. And as a milestone anniversary, it is appropriate and it is vitally important to assess the promise of higher education in California. Today we ask our panelists to explore for us three questions towards this goal. And I'm going to read the questions and then I'm going to actually pose the questions here so we kind of have a direction of where we're going. First, how did the promise shape and structure the systems of higher education then existing in the state, and what did those systems achieve as a result of their being pulled together into an integrated system? And what were the limitations and challenges to the system? The second question, what was the original intention of the people of California in creating a master plan for higher education? What was the promise for the master plan? And the third question, what was the state of the system of higher education today? What is the state of higher education today? And what happened to it in the recent past to the promise of accessible higher education? So we have a lot of experience here. We have fantastic speakers here. So I'm going to go ahead and pose the first question, and this is directed to Mr. Tom Hayden. Pardon me. Mr. Hayden, you have had an intimate role in the management of the system in the critical years from 1982 through the end of the century. What insights can you share with us from your experience?
Well, thank you. First of all, I hope you'll invite me back on May 5th. I've had a personal requirement that I leave at 2 today, and I'm very sorry about that, but I understand that you're going to continue the discussion of the master plan. So, let me be very brief and try to be as conversational as possible here. I was the chair of Higher Education Committee in the state legislature in the Assembly many years ago, decades ago. And I was caught up in a review of the master plan, which is a subject that virtually no citizens of California know a thing about, because some prior legislators had required a periodic review. And from an inside standpoint, it's useful, because otherwise we never would have looked at it again. But since I was chairing this, I spent over a year, and I don't know how many hours, reviewing the master plan, in my youthful enthusiasm, believing that somehow there could be reforms that would come out of it. In fact, it was quite an exercise, and nothing came of it. So the point I would make is that the purpose of the master plan is twofold. On the one hand, there's eloquent promises. It was sold to the people of California, and there was some truth in it, that it would afford quality higher education to any person in the state of California. And then, as you know, there's always an inside reality. And the more I studied it, I realized that from the perspective of organizational sociology, you could call this a jurisdictional agreement to keep three fractious areas of higher education from fighting each other: the UC system, the CSU system, and the community colleges. It's a jurisdictional laying down of your function is this and no more. Our function is this and no more. We will not compete with each other. We will not raid each other. We will not poach on each other's territory, so on. And there were these rivalries. The CSUs wanted to have PhD programs and research. That was forbidden. Many of the community colleges wanted to be CSUs. That was forbidden. There was a fourth element that was a shadow element, and that is the private sector. And they wanted to have themselves renamed the independent sector, as if the public sector was a lesser arena, and the word private was embarrassing, so they wanted to have all the private colleges renamed as independent colleges, and their model was Harvard. Then there was another sector which was ignored that I thought could be usefully integrated, and that was the K-12 system. You'll notice that Mr. Ortiz-Oakley's title is President Superintendent. This derives from the fact that the community colleges at one point were considered part of K-12, where the head of a K-12 system is called a superintendent, kind of a warden function. I don't know what it means, but
feels like that sometimes.
Superintendent. And so their quest was to get the status of being called a college and break away from the status of being part of high school. If you have a long view, I suppose these things matter, but the point I want to make is this. I thought there certainly would be a blackboard in here, but you can imagine this or draw it on your hand. Just draw a triangle or a pyramid. Now notice they look the same. Which one did you draw?
Pyramid.
What's the difference between a pyramid and a triangle?
3D, one's 3D, one's 2D. One's 3D, one's 2D.
One's three-dimensional, one's two-dimensional.
Good? I think we think about pyramid as hierarchical, and a triangle lays flat, right? And what in a nutshell, what the master plan did was create a create a pyramid for higher education that should really be a triangle. I'll explain. In the pyramid, at the top is UC, in the middle is CSU, and at the bottom, representing the largest segment, are community colleges, right? And you have to realize feeding them is K-12. That should be included in this master plan, but it's not. So you can understand the concept of the triangle very easily by simply looking at the wage structure and the amount of money spent by the California taxpayer. I won't bore you with the numbers from 1986, but I guarantee you nothing has changed relatively. The largest amount of per student tax contribution goes to the students at the University of California. Next goes to the students at CSU. The lowest goes to the community colleges. Secondly, if you look at the wage structure for the faculty, teaching staff, the highest paid faculty, UC, the middle range salaries, CSU, the bottom, community college. If you look at the grade point averages and academic background of the students, you find the students who are at UC have the highest high school performance records. The average students are either at CSU or at community college. The students who are the lowest performing are in the community colleges. Now, I teach. Which do you think is easier, to teach students who are already 4-point students, or students who are returning Iraq vets, or people who are, recently divorced and coming back into the workforce, or people of color who have made it through a miserable inner city school system. I would say I should be paid more for teaching those who are in the community colleges. That's work. It is not work at UC. In fact, there's very little teaching of undergraduates at UC. We made them quite embarrassed about it. They say we have too heavy a teaching load, which means they're in the classroom 2-3 hours a week. We pushed them, how about 6 hours a week? Where are they? They're seeking money and grants on top of the money they already have in order to publish research documents and books and become part of an inter-university elite around the country that models itself after each other. And they set this pattern. So to me, it should be, in fact, a triangle rather than a pyramid. And I ran into real difficulty getting beyond the conceptual stage here, because everybody in the pyramid is locked into their role, pretty much. But by a triangle, I mean, you don't have to make all the many institutions in California the same. There's plenty of room for diversity and that sort of thing in the functions of colleges and universities, but the triangular relationship means that there's a partnership between the three. A partnership, not a hierarchy in which one is above all the others. And here's why this is an important concept, the triangle. In the promise, which was the question, the promise of equal opportunity for a quality education made to anyone who entered any of these three segments. So the idea was there at the beginning. That means the crux of the matter is whether the transfer program works. Under the master plan, you should be assured that if you enter at this fine community college, you can take 2 years of undergraduate courses and transfer automatically to CSU or UC as if the education you got was the equivalent that you would have gotten at Berkeley. Is that the law? I could never find out if it was the law, because UC claims it's outside the law. It has a constitutional protection from government interference. So I'm not clear. But we acted as if it wasn't the law when in fact it was as close to our official policy as possible. So in a triangular relationship, you see the problem with the pyramid, right? Because while you can get excellent education at Long Beach or Santa Monica Community College, it will not be based on the same amount of resources that are invested by the taxpayer into freshmen at UCLA. So I think that's unconstitutional. I think that's an inequality that is built into the system. If you could tell me a way for the triangle to be perfected through the transfer program, I would be fine with it. But I think what happens now is the perpetuation of the pyramid at the expense of the middle class, working people, and people of color in the state of California. So if you want to change it, the usual cry is for more funding. And I'll just leave you with just one thought and take any questions you might have. It's not only about funding. If one magical morning the legislature and Governor Schwarzenegger decided to double the funding and take the burden off the students and their families, more funding would entrench the inequalities, the stratification system within the pyramid. More funding would mean more funding for UC than for CSU or community college. So there has to be a grappling with the politics of educational equity, not just excellence, because the distribution of the taxpayer dollars goes to perpetuate a hierarchy that I do not think serves the majority of people in our state. Is this off? Yes, it's off. Who's running this program?
The speaker.
That young man.
Oh, no, I'll project.
There you go.
No, that's okay. I want to continue by asking our historian, Dr. Hendricks, if he can tell us about the origins, promise, and structuring of the system of higher education in California. Dr. Hendricks.
Okay, so we're not going to ask questions and say that for later. Did you need to ask questions? Have questions now?
Well, maybe we could ask if anyone has a question.
No, I don't want to hog the...
Okay. Okay, great. Okay. All right, well, what I'm going to do is give a brief overview of how this system developed from the 1950s until the 1980s or so, and then leave the rest for our other two panelists. The Master Plan for Education, for Higher Education in California, is a result of the chaotic and dramatic growth in California after World War II. This is when California's population went from 7 million in 1940 to 10 million in 1950 to 15 million in 1960 and onward until we are here now 37 million people. And so there was such chaotic and dramatic growth in California, population growth. The demand for education, especially by returning military veterans, was very, very high. This created a kind of chaotic situation in California where communities began vying with each other for who would have the next college built and the next community college and so on and so forth. And so legislators began to realize that this was a problem, and in 1958, 1959 they began to work on a plan which eventually became the Master Plan for Higher Education. And so there were four conditions that really led to this master plan developing by 1959, and that was large enrollment increases predicted for the 1960s, and boy, that really did come true, as enrollment in higher education in California went from about 225,000 in 1950 to about 700,000 by 1965, and then since then doubled to more than 1.5 million in the 1970s and 1980s. So large enrollment increases which did come true. The second was this chaotic and uncontrolled aspirations of local communities to have campuses built in their communities. So for example, in 1958 there were 22 competing legislative proposals for new campuses. This had to be sorted out. The third thing was a fear among each segment of higher education of uncontrolled competition and turf battles, as Mr. Hayden talked about. And the fourth thing was a desire for the state legislature to create an orderly system of growth from the 1960s and 1970s. And the result was this plan called the Master Plan for Higher Education, 1960-1975, which has been revised a number of times. There have been about 7 revisions of this program since 1959. Mr. Hayden worked on one of them. And so this all got wrapped up by 1960 in a legislative bill called the Donahue Higher Education Act of 1960. And this bill created a three-tiered pyramid segment, a three-tiered level of education, higher education in California. So for example, the University of California was, where people could apply to the University of California if they were in the top 12.5% of their graduating high school class. The next 25% could apply to the California State University system, which was then in progress of being made, and the rest were qualified for admission at California community colleges. The idea was to provide, in the words of the Donahue Act, that each resident of California who has the capacity and motivation to benefit from higher education should have an opportunity to enroll in any institution of higher education, to encourage the development of a well-educated citizenry. What a concept. As the best guarantee for a free and healthy society. They also talked about personal development, the improvement of the quality of life, and the improvement of society. So this master plan was seen as the key to developing a state that could be progressive, modern, and meet the challenges of the future. That was the idea anyway. And so there were 2 great successes that came out of this master plan. The first success was that roles were delineated for each of the 3 segments. Each of the 3 segments had their roles. And the second success, at least in the 60s and 70s, were the ideas of access for all Californians, affordability, and believe it or not, these systems were affordable until very recently, equity, access for all people, and finally quality. And none of these four were privileged above the others. Access, affordability, equity, and quality. All were supposed to have equal standing in this system. And so the great focus here was produce an educated citizenry. The taxpayers of California would foot the bill and educate succeeding generations of Californians who they would stay in California, get jobs, raise families, pay taxes, and support the following generations. This is a great idea. This was a great success. And in the words of one of the architects of this system, Clark Kerr, who was the president of the University of California in the 1960s, this was the first, he says, these are his words, it was the first time in the history of any state in the United States or any nation in the world where such a commitment was made to education, that there would be a place for every high school graduate or person otherwise qualified in California. This is an amazing accomplishment in the context of the 1950s and 1960s. And there has been great success. For example, the 1975 enrollment in higher education in California was more than double the predicted number. More than 1.4 million people enrolled in higher education in California by 1975. 60 new campuses were built throughout the state, community colleges, state universities, and UCs. High school graduation increased by 300% in the 1960s and 1970s. The number of bachelor degrees and Bachelor of Science degrees increased by almost 500% in the 1960s and 1970s. So this was a great success. Now, the three systems charted out their roles in this system, and so the roles of each would be the following. The University of California would reserve for itself research, professional education, and be the sole authority in granting degrees in law, medicine, dentistry, and veterinary medicine. So research, professional education, the granting of PhDs would come from the University of California. The California State University system would be in charge of undergraduate education, professional education to the master's degree level, Master of Science, Master of Arts, professional education, teacher education, and eventually some CSU campuses would be allowed to offer joint doctorates with the University of California. And faculty research was supposed to focus on the primary mission of instructions at the CSU. The community colleges were tasked with the idea of academic and vocational education for the first 2 years. The idea that you could take 4 semesters of community college work and transfer automatically into one of these 2 higher education systems. Also, remedial education was tasked to the community colleges, English as a second language, adult non-credit instruction, community service courses, which have long since gone away in community colleges, and workforce training. And so the idea was the community colleges would present universal access to the 4-year segments, either at the CSU level or the University of California level. And as I say, there was tremendous success of this because campuses were built, and faculty were hired, and bachelor degrees increased. And so this really did provide workforce training, vocational education, provided a stable and educated workforce for California in the 1960s and 70s and 80s as we sort of met the challenge of the post-war world and the global economy and all that. And so by any standard, this was a terrific success. And the reason, among many reasons we know this, is because the University of California system, or the California system, was copied all throughout the United States. The Florida system, the New Jersey system, all these systems across the United States copied the New York system, where I went to my graduate training. When I arrived in New York in 1970, I was told that the place I was going to school was, welcome to the State University of New York at Stony Brook, the Berkeley of the East. Oh, well, so much for all that. But anyway, the idea that the New York system, these were all copied on the great success being achieved by the University, by the California State system of higher education. And so I would say that through the 1970s, there was considerable success in this program, especially providing access to ethnic and racial minorities, to explore the issues of workforce development. I think there was a lot of success here. Now, as time goes on, there are challenges begin to arise, and the first challenge is that these turf fights never did stop. that the University of California, because it has a special status within California, it's mentioned in the California State Constitution, and therefore it can operate outside of legislative oversight to some degree. I don't know if you would agree with that or not. And they pretty much can write their own ticket. And so, as Mr. Hayden pointed out, they sort of grabbed the lion's share of the education budget in California. The CSUs, as they grew in number, grew in stature, grew in importance, they began to fight for their share of the pie. And the California community colleges, only very recently, only in the 1980s, I would say, have begun to organize themselves for political purposes and begin to try to grab their share of what was left. And so these turf fights never did end. They've been a consistent problem all through this time period. And as we get into the 1980s and 1990s, we begin to see, challenges begin to emerge. Probably the biggest challenge is the greater demand for higher education. And the systems opens up access. People want more access. People want more access to the system, and the numbers increasingly get greater and greater and greater. And so we have more people in higher education than most countries in the world, just in California. The demands of the global economy also put tremendous pressure on the education system. The fact that workers in California would have to compete not just in the United States, but compete globally. And this meant more education demands, new programs, new issues, and so on and so forth. And these will have to be taken on by various segments of the system. Also, California's population grows, not only grows in numbers, but also grows in diversity, more diverse population. How do you meet the needs of people who aren't necessarily prepared for success at the college level? Probably the biggest issue after these is declining state support. So at some point, it's hard to say exactly when, I would say about the early 1980s, 1982 or 1983, state support for community colleges and the CSUs and UC began to decline, seriously decline. So much so that you have situations, for example, like campuses like UCLA, where something like only 20% of their yearly budget comes from the state of California anymore. They get most from grants, federal grants, state grants, international grants, whatever. And so with less money coming from the state, more opportunity to do what they want to do and guide, promote their own destiny. And so the idea of declining state support really throws this whole pyramid system or triangular system in serious difficulties. The last thing that comes up is that as we get in the 1990s and early 2000s, the three systems have sort of difficulty in maintaining their roles and their mission. What is each supposed to do? So, for example, in the CSU, there was a strong remedial mission. CSU provided a significant amount of remedial education, especially in math, for students arriving at the CSU who were unprepared for that. About 6 or 7 or 8 years ago, the CSU kind of decided by itself that it wasn't going to do that anymore, and began to say, look, we're not in charge of remedial education, we want the community colleges to do that. And so if our students come to Cal State Long Beach or Cal State Fullerton or Cal State Monterey Bay and they're not prepared in math, then we're going to shunt them back to the community colleges. At a time when community college enrollments were exploding and we're running out of classrooms and running out of facilities. And so this idea of maintaining different roles begins to erode as well. And so these are all problems that develop in the last, say, 15 or 20 years. And so these are issues that haven't really been addressed, despite the fact that the legislature has reviewed the master plan a number of times, and most recently was 1999 to 2004. There hasn't been a significant reshaping of this system. And what a lot of us are afraid of is that this reshaping is now being done independently by the three systems without any kind of oversight. And so, for example, the CSU system is now beginning to reshape itself and think about eliminating various services on various campuses. So, for example, you might have a campus that's entirely devoted to science or engineering, won't have traditional liberal arts, or won't have any other departments. And so that kind of reshaping or reimagining the roles of these individual systems is taking place right now as we speak. And the oversight then is not there, and so perhaps this is something that we need to address in the future. So that's kind of a brief history of the master plan for education. And despite the fact that it's run into serious difficulties and there's this need to reassess what's actually going on, the thing to remember, I think, overall, is this has been a tremendous gesture by the people of California, the voters of California, from the 1950s to where we are today, to try to ensure access and quality and affordability of their campuses. Now, these are challenges that we'll see will not go away, and so I'm guessing now that there'll be this sort of agonizing reappraisal of the role of the master plan in years to come. And I guess we'll have to wait and see how that plays out.
Thank you, Dr. Hendricks. Mr. Oakley, it is your responsibility to manage one of our great community colleges today. What can you share with us about the challenges you and all of us face today?
Thank you, Kevin. Hope you're all seated because I'm about to upset a few of you. And I hope I do. I think what Mr. Hayden and Mr. Hendricks have described is pretty accurate description of where we've been, how we got here. Let me talk about where we're at. And let me do that by peeling back an onion for you. First of all, I think the concept of the master plan is absolutely a wonderful concept, regardless of whether it came together for altruistic reasons or because of this need to bring peace to this fight between the three systems, which the reality is that it really was spawned because of these constant battles between the systems over growth, over resources. Fortunately, there was enough foresight to put this together in a way that really did create a model for the rest of the United States and really the world to emulate. But I think the system over time has not had any oversight. There was supposed to be an oversight structure put in place to make sure that the three systems were working together. That structure became what we know today as CPEC, this organization in Sacramento that's supposed to be overseeing how the three systems work and grow and share resources. That's never really happened in actuality. CPEC is a hollow organization that has very little influence on what happens in higher education. And so over time, politicians, and to a great extent Californians, have romanticized the master plan. Romanticized the master plan because we have always, in California, prided ourselves on the fact that a great majority of Californians, working-age Californians, had higher education degrees. Until recently, of course, which I'll get into later. But if you peel that onion, only 50% of the adult age population that had a degree received their degree in California. For a long period of time, because of whether it's the space race or the great innovation that was happening in California, Silicon Valley, etc., a tremendous amount of migration of college-degreed individuals domestically from the rest of the United States, from China, from India, came to California. There was this huge need for degreed individuals. And so we supplemented the working-age population in California with imported degrees. Those are gone now. They are staying home in Ohio, they are staying in Pennsylvania, they are staying in Texas and Florida, they're staying in India, and they're staying in China, because those have thriving economies of their own. So we find ourselves in a dilemma now that we can't not produce enough graduates. The Public Policy Institute of California suggests that we have to increase the number of graduates by 1 million by 2025 just to keep up with the current economy in California. So I think if you look at the master plan over time, it has been successful, but not successful to the point that we've required in California to be, particularly for students of color. And, you know, that's not just me making things up. I mean, if you consider the success rate of Californians of color in higher education currently, 18% for Latino students, 15% for African American students. Of those individuals who enter the higher education system as compared to those who get out with some sort of degree. As the workforce has begun to primarily rely on those populations, we have experienced the dilemma we're in now. That is, at a time in our economy when the need for a degree has increased tremendously because of the nature of the economy in California, and really the nature of the economy globally, is the same time where our adult population is now less educated than previously. You know, again, I point to the Public Policy Institute of California, and several other folks have looked at this, and the number of, from age 65 and older, that's, what we tend to consider the baby boom generation, which is on their way out to retirement, although because of the economy, they're staying longer than we anticipated, but we're ranked third in the nation as far as having associate degrees or higher, and seventh, having bachelor degrees or higher. That adult population of 65 or older. Age 25 to 34, which is the prime workforce, we are now ranked 29th in the nation. I don't see how you can look at that number and say that California's master plan is working. Okay? It is not working. As a matter of fact, it's disgraceful. And we are not saying that enough. This is the most populous state in the Union. We have the greatest diversity in the nation, and we are falling behind tremendously, not just in the United States, but throughout the world. And if we're going to be competitive, something has to be done with the master plan. It is wonderful to say we want equal, emphasis on equal, access to all in California to receive a quality education and to have a place in higher education. The reality is that that is not true today. It has not been true for a while, but it's certainly not true today. And it really becomes incumbent upon you all, the voters, to do something about that. And to require the legislature to not just review it, and Mr. Hayden made a great point, it was reviewed. But there was not political will to really peel back the onion and to do something about some of the situations that he described, because those have just become worse. They have become worse. And so, the reality today is what we're struggling with, what you all are experiencing every day, is this tremendous desire for higher education and opportunity, not just for access, because, look folks, California community colleges have nearly 3 million students today. That makes it the most accessible higher education organization in the entire world. There are a little over 8 million community college students nationwide. We have nearly 3 million in California. The reality is, it's not just an access issue, it's a success issue. Those students are not completing because there are not clear pathways for success in our higher education system. By a show of hands, how many of you students are thinking about transferring to more than one university in California, CSU or UC? I'm sure you've sat there and looked at your college catalog and the college catalog of the university you want to transfer to and tried to sort out how the hell do you get there. Because what gets you into one university, taking a class, a particular load of classes, does not get you into another state university. Okay? If this is a system, we are not functioning as a system. We are making it increasingly harder, particularly for students of color who don't have the experience in their households of how to navigate our system, to navigate the system. And we need to correct that. We should demand that community colleges, CSUs, and UCs work together to make that pathway easier on you all. And instead, we continue to make it more complicated. And that is, I think, the dilemma we face. And again, I go back to the whole premise. California's master plan is a terrific idea. But like with every plan, it has to evolve. It has not evolved. Like with every plan, it has to be funded. It has not been funded. And the funding has gone in directions that don't support the greatest amount of students getting quality education, that is at the bottom of the pyramid that Mr. Hayden described. So that's what certainly we struggle with in California today, is trying to find a way to spark that conversation at a time when the economy is devastated, at a time when we have committed most of the resources in California to all sorts of different priorities, and these are all wonderful priorities, but the fact of the matter is, at some point we have to decide, are we going to focus on the future or are we going to focus on the past? Right now we're funding the past, all of our past mistakes. And so somehow or another, and there are many conversations going on today, many organizations, many philanthropic institutions are popping up all over the place talking about California becoming a real system. You hear President Obama saying the same thing. We've got to improve our completion rates. We've got to put more quality degrees, certificates in the hands of our working age population for this country to be successful. And that's got to happen today, not tomorrow. So I challenge you all to learn as much as you can about this and other issues and to express your passions about your future and the future of your children and cause the state to actually start to pay attention.
Thank you.
So I'd like to go ahead and field some questions.
Good man.
If you have any, if possible, since he needs to leave at 2 o'clock.
Yes. That's my fault.
Yes, go ahead.
It was touched upon, but did the original master plan actually allocate funds by
No.
division in the system? Was there an allocation of funds to each one of the divisions?
No, absolutely not. The University of California would always go in and say what they wanted from the legislature, and the CSU would go in and the community colleges would come in one at a time. So it's a very, very chaotic funding situation, at least in my opinion.
That's not quite true. People with green eye shades, and my father was one of these people, are very good at developing funding formulas. And then the legislature, which are generalists, they just sort of repeat the formulas from year to year. We would call it jokingly a Xerox-based budget. For instance, there's a funding formula for mouse equivalent units at UC. In high school, there's average daily attendance, and so on. So there are funding units, and here's the problem with them. They're not based on performance. They're based basically on how many warm bodies you can keep in a seat. And any attempt to introduce any other factors, like what's your dropout rate, what are you doing about it, what's your transfer program, how well does it work, are rebuffed politically. And the formulas for the pay at each of the segments are also there, and they debate every year whether to increase them by 2% or decrease them, but they're there. Now, by contrast, I want you to understand the National University of Mexico is free. Oh, you say, oh, Mexico. Well, free. How about the Sorbonne? Free. How about Oxford? Last time I looked, it was about $1,000 a semester. We are the only country in the world that I know of, by any comparable status, that lacks a serious commitment to the funding of public higher education, and it will increasingly show.
Good questions. Yes, sir.
I have a question for President of our school. I'm getting ready to get into the nursing program here, and I'm checking about transferring into the different Cal State systems and everything after finishing the nursing program here. And what I'm concerned about is I'm hearing about the dropout rate here at Long Beach City, and that our quality of education is not as equal to some of the other community colleges, and they're like kind of looking down on us. So my question is there like any thing in the future that's going to be done to improve the less dropout rate in our college here?
Well, I appreciate your question, although I will try to limit my response to just a few minutes, and I'll try to calm myself down. First of all, you're talking about enrolling in our nursing program. You're enrolling in one of the best nursing programs in the nation, and I can honestly say that. It is a very difficult program to get into, so I wish you the best of luck. Because there are only so many seats that we can fund, but nonetheless, it is an excellent program. Long Beach City College is a large, comprehensive college. We are proud to say that we take the top 100% of students. Now, when you take the top 100% of students, that brings a great number of challenges. We pride ourselves on doing everything we can to helping every student succeed. Not every college welcomes the top 100% of students. Okay, so we could have much better rates if I told you don't come to Long Beach City College unless you have a 3.4 grade point average. Or if I created programs that really dissuade you from coming. But that's not what community college is about. Community college is about allowing everyone an opportunity to come and to fulfill their educational dreams. We need to do a better job of doing that. There is no doubt about that, and I think if you talk to any faculty member, staff member, that's exactly what we're talking about today. How do we take the hand that we're dealt and produce the greatest result with that? It becomes our responsibility. So I would say to you, you have picked a great community college, and as long as it suits your needs, you should stay here. You know, I wouldn't be here without a community college. You know, I took off. I wasn't UC eligible after high school. I went to the Army. I came back, didn't enroll in community college until 6 years after I finished high school. I would not be here. There is no question about it. So I would say we are going to continue to work to do what Mr. Hayden just mentioned. Focus on performance. Focus on producing the greatest results possible for our students and doing everything we can to continue to learn from you as to what you need and to structure our programs to meet those needs. And as long as you're willing to come to the table and give it 110%, you'll be successful.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Is anyone tracking this statistic that says this is a California high school graduate, because I mean, we have some responsibility, we in California, for the education of California high school students. So of the graduates of a California high school who attend a community college or a CSU or a UC, what percentage of those people are earning college degrees? President Oakley, you gave a statistic for the 24 to 35 age group. How many of those people are graduates of a California high school? But we can't take responsibility for the education of other countries and other states and try to tailor our system to fit the needs of the entire country. If we could fix it to meet the needs of everyone in California, and that would be a huge accomplishment in itself. So I wonder if anyone is tracking that particular statistic. California high school graduates and their success rate.
Well, first of all, let me just say, you know, today's California high school is very different than the California high school you attended. Chances are that the university that you graduated from, you would not get into today. I mean, that's the reality. It's become much more competitive. The standards have increased tremendously, and there is huge demand for the University of California and CSU system in California. Now, having said all that, we've also had huge increases in population in California, huge demographic shifts. High schools, K-12s, have been underfunded. And you look at Long Beach alone, each and every one of its high schools is nearly 5,000 students. These high schools were built for maybe 2,500 students. So, but the high school students that are transferring directly to the University of California or CSU system are having pretty similar, if not better, success than our transfer students. It's very similar. the question becomes, are they prepared to go to college right after high school? If they are, they're pretty successful. Those that are not, that's where our problem is, and that's where the California Community College System comes into play. Now, as good as CSU is, even if you look at their numbers, less than 50% of those who enter CSU graduate within 6 years. So, there are tremendous challenges there as well. And as Mr. Hayden said, if the cream goes to UC, well, they have no excuse. They have the easiest job. But
Of teaching.
of teaching, yes. The reality is, it is our responsibility to sort of correct whatever didn't work. That's what we were placed on this earth for in the California Community College System, is to provide that access and to help create that bridge. The problem has been that we have not been funded correctly. The funding formula that funds California community colleges is focused on funding our system on the first 3 weeks of the semester, not on how many students complete. And therefore, you get all sorts of perverse incentives to focus on access and to not focus resources on supporting the faculty and students in those classes to make sure that they're successful. And so that's what needs to change. Not that we need to close our doors, we just need to refocus our efforts and be real about what's in front of us.
And what do you attribute to the lack of political will to actually fund higher education, including community colleges? Is the system bankrupt?
Well, community colleges, I think, were sideswiped by Prop 13.
Well, that's for sure.
People forget that the funding stream for City College here, community colleges, came out of local property taxes for quite a long time from the Second World War. And Prop 13 was depicted as saving the homeowner, so people didn't know that they were sinking the budget of the community colleges in the same deal. That's part of it. You've got to really keep your eye on what these politicians are saying. I say that as one of them. The other thing this puzzles me, because I believe there's a constituency, majority constituency, for doing what the chancellor has said, the president has said here. It's the families of students of color, working class people, middle class people, who have in common the desire for affordable access, and once in, they want to make sure that the cost is not jacked up so that their students are burdened with impossible debt. That's a majority of people, and it revolves around a very deep American aspiration for opportunity and fair play. The question is why nobody runs for governor on that platform. I would if I was 30 years younger. I try to analyze it politically, and I just don't know, but I think there is a sort of the public, some of the people out there believe that they're not qualified to really judge higher education. There's a kind of an inferiority complex if you didn't go to UC, I suppose. The students are transitory, so they don't constitute a permanent voting bloc. You use your time well, you have some impact if you're a student, and then you're out of the place, and you rejoin the general population in the yard. And the faculty has fought for representation, and they're segmented according to the professional jobs that they have, and they don't play well together. And so there's a huge potential, I think, for a political platform, but it doesn't have the unified force of, say, the prison guards of California, or law enforcement, or the highway construction lobby. And to me, it's not that it can't be done. It's we've got to wake up and find a way to do it. I think part of the last reason is that there's no money in it. There's no campaign contributions. And politicians go towards campaign contributions. And if the Board of Regents and Trustees are generally Republicans appointed by Republican governors, where's the money for a candidate who wants to challenge the system? It's all going to go the other way. And you'd be challenging the status quo in your own district. People would be saying, well, don't rattle the cage too much because we want, you know, the home college protected, I suppose. It's still, to the extent that politics is also about commitment and will, which it is, I think, to an extent, there's no one out there that seems to have the commitment or will to do it. Jerry Brown could. I don't think he will. So it'll have to come from an outside, credible outside voice of conscience who knows what they're talking about, because it's not just a demand, but step by step how you would do it to guarantee that you get results would be very, very hard. A person on my left comes to mind as a potential candidate for governor, but I guess his time is taken with being a superintendent. But there's
Doesn't pay enough.
doesn't pay enough. See, everybody's got a reason.
Too much aggravation.
Everybody has a price. All right. There's a number of people like this around the state who could run. Much as I admire the students and faculty who are putting up this fight against these draconian increases in costs, they need to find a candidate who will make this something that's unavoidable in the next general gubernatorial election. That's how you move an agenda. You have a candidate that gets so many votes, even if they lose, other people start to accept the agenda and find other places to cut the budget. So I would add to your workload the search for credible candidates. What's Senator Lowenthal doing? Is he still around?
Yeah, he's still around. Yeah.
Sure.
He's looking for another job.
There you go. That's all I have to suggest on the matter. I'm sorry I'm going to have to go in a minute. But
Just one comment. Term limits, however, limit these people, for example, who may be champions in the legislature, who then may lose their platform.
I'm talking about somebody, whether they're termed out or not, run for governor in the Democratic primary or run as an independent, and just make it absolutely focused. The doors of higher education, the opportunity for your kid to have an affordable shot at higher education and a job for the future is at stake here. That is what this election is about. It's one issue. I think you would rally a surprising coalition if you had a credible platform with some details and a good candidate. And the others, you know, the nature of politicians, they're chameleons. They would start to say, oh, I agree with this and I agree with that, and slowly you would begin to move the process.
Mr. Hayden, in 1987, you sponsored AB 746, which provided for insurances for equal access to education for students with disabilities. Thank you for that legislation. As a disabled students coordinator at our college, I want to ask you what advice you would have for me as I do battle with my legislators and with half the people in this room for resources to ensure that we have equal access for those students.
Thank you. Thank you. My advice is that should have been incorporated into the master plan and given more weight. You should consider litigation. I think there also should be litigation against the master plan. Somebody should say, on behalf of community colleges, we cannot, because of the disparity of funding, we can't provide the equal opportunity that the transfer program implies. It could also be a political platform, but I think there's room here to take the matter to the courts. You are being shortchanged, and I think it's a good question whether you're entitled to these opportunities. I think you are, and the disparity in the funding has gone on so long that other remedies have failed, and therefore the court is sometimes the last resort. Just a thought.
if I could follow up on that, actually the ACLU sued the
K-12.
public education system for exactly that issue and won the Williams judgment.
That's right, they did.
And got $1 billion from the governor to equalize money going to
They
those
did.
campuses that were underfunded. So this is not such a bad idea. It's actually pretty interesting. We have any litigants?
Plaintiffs, please come up and say.
Other questions?
Nice to meet you.
Great to meet you as well.
Yeah, I just had a quick question, but I guess he's leaving. In all those
That
countries
would be me.
where education is free, Paris, Rome, places, Europe, England probably, and Toronto, only the very elite get in. So it's a smaller number that get a free education, and everybody else has to find a career somewhere else. And there's a lot of discussion these days about the fact that maybe there should be not as much college offered to people who don't need college to flip hamburgers or, we're at a time in our country now where not all jobs require an education, and maybe education is too expensive, and some people feel that that is a problem, that we're paying too much money for no reason. How do you feel about that?
I'm not aware that those countries are so elitist in the base of educated people. I think they have more educated people, for the most part, than we do. The master plan was reinforced by a 1973 Carnegie study of California that said the future of California depends on a thin, clear stream of excellence, which meant we only have to educate the talented few, and it's kind of a trickle-down economic theory applied to education. So if we educate a few PhDs, they will generate enough economic activity and I suppose culture that it will trickle down to everyone else. It's complete nonsense. It's just the oldest argument against democracy, the oldest argument for aristocracy. I agree not everybody needs to go to college, I suppose, but I mean, everybody can benefit from it. It's not just about getting a job. You're supposed to think. You're supposed to cultivate the mind. Have we become so narrow-minded that we don't even bring this up? I mean, I've taught for many years, and I take great pride in the fact that when I leave the classroom, I think my students know more about sociology than they did beforehand. Is that going to improve their standard of living? Can't hurt, maybe, but they wouldn't be in the class if they were trying to be rich. They're in the class because they want to be well-rounded and rich if they can.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Yes.
I have to make a comment. I don't think there's anything from my department. You know, I always have to have a little bit of a say. To this young gentleman, please come see me. I'm Alicia Andrico, one of the counselors. I would love to have you in my office and we can have a dialogue. This is a great college. I've had the opportunity to do K through 12 in my lifetime as well as private.
Who's criticizing this? Community college? I don't know where
What
that
we're
is.
really speaking to today is that students have to work. To all the students here, good students, and many of us as faculty were good students. We took care of business and we got what we needed to be done. Students have to be on their game plan today. There is no more room to just say, I've got these growing pains and I'm coming around in the last quarter of the game. Nursing students, and we spoke to nursing, so I have to clarify that. Students with good GPAs and do take care of business will get to where they need to be, and that goes for any major today. To my friend over here with the camera, love you, thank you for all your work at the college, but I'm a firm believer that we have to have a skilled workforce. I think that message came through here. This is the beautiful state of California. Born and bred here, love it, the Golden State. I teach students about the gold rush, having been an old historian. We've got to, for the sake of all of us, and I know we don't know about Social Security, and we've got to have an educated workforce. And then speaking to my friend back here, Tennis, thank you, more PhDs. I don't have the number, but more PhDs out of community colleges for underrepresented students. So that speaks very highly to the great work that's being done. So I just needed to clarify those few points.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I would like to agree with that too, because if we don't have an educated workforce, those are the same people who are going to be voting on our politics, and how can people make a intelligent decision if they're not educated? And then also, I want to ask the superintendent about transferring. You brought up the problem, but do you have a solution? Do you have an idea of how to, because
How much time do you
I'm
have?
having that issue too, like just figuring out, like I look at that thing and I go to a counselor, and sometimes it seems like the counselor doesn't even know really what to tell me what classes to take sometimes. It's like, when will I transfer?
You haven't seen Alicia then.
Will I ever get out of community college?
Okay, I'd be happy to answer that question to the extent that we have enough time to answer it. But yes, there are solutions, and there's a lot of good people talking about the solutions and trying to get the momentum in place to actually put those solutions into a place where they're actually going to be seriously considered. There are a number of issues, stretching all the way back to the K-12. First and foremost, we should be clear on what college-ready means. High school students throughout California, for that matter the nation, it should be clear what college-ready means. And so it shouldn't be a definition that's determined by each higher education institution. UC, CSU, community college, we all have different ways of looking at college-ready. We need to send a clear message to high school students. What do we want you to do, and what do you need to be ready for, and not equivocate on that. And if you're not ready, this is what you need to do to get ready. So, as far as your specific question, first of all, and this has been discussed throughout the history of CSU and community college, common course nomenclature, whether or not that's the answer, I don't know, but the answer should be that if you take a psychology class at College of the Redwoods in Humboldt, it should be the same psychology class, and it should transfer the same way as the psychology class you take at Long Beach City College. And there shouldn't be a question of whether or not the faculty at College of the Redwoods are any better or worse than the psychology faculty at Long Beach City College. It should be the same. And that should transfer the same to CSU Long Beach, CSU Humboldt, or to any one of the CSU systems. You shouldn't have to worry about that. And I know, to my colleagues in the community college system, my faculty college, that they've tried to enter and engage in that conversation with CSU faculty. Are there any CSU faculty in this room? Okay, it's their fault. No, seriously, there has to be a forced conversation to come to an agreement, and then UC has to be brought to the table as well. We sometimes don't talk about UC for the reasons been discussed. They think they live on another planet, and because they're enshrined in the Constitution, that's been supported. But there's got to be clear pathways to any student who enters a transfer program at any one of the 110 community colleges in California to any other state university. It's got to be clarity. So that is a solution. How we get there is a whole nother issue, but we've got to get there. There is a lot of talk about getting there. There are bills in the legislature right now that try to get at forcing some of that change on community colleges by requiring that community colleges create a transfer AA. In essence, if you get an AA, a transfer AA, that means you're ready to transfer. There's some things about that solution that are misguided because it doesn't look at the situation holistically. The other issue is making sure that there's capacity in the state university system for you to transfer. Right now, that's a question. I mean, we are being inundated with CSU and UC students who are being turned away. I don't think that will persist for more than another year. because UC and CSU are under tremendous pressure to increase capacity. But that was the promise of the master plan. If you do what you're supposed to do, you have room. That's not happening. So it's got to be looked at from a system-wide perspective, from K-12, really from high school all the way through the UC system. And there's got to be a clear pathway established. And to get to the other point, not every student will or can transfer to a state university. There's just not enough capacity. And the reality is, according to the transfer numbers, we're not even close to making that happen. But there should be a clear pathway to skills needed to survive in today's economy. Everybody needs additional education beyond high school. I think there is a clear consensus in the United States that that is true. How that looks and how that happens is the issue. Whether that's community college or some other way of getting you those skills have to be transferred to you, and we need to build those skills as a nation for you to be successful, not just in getting a job at McDonald's, but at getting a job that sustains you and your family so that you can contribute to the economy and create more tax revenue so that I can have more money to open up more classes.
Oops. Okay. I guess that's not working. Oh, yeah. Let me just follow up real quickly on that. As an example of creating these kind of clear pathways, we here in Long Beach, and that includes Cal State Long Beach and Long Beach City College and Long Beach Unified School District, have been engaged in a program the last 15 years called Seamless Education Initiative. Now, what this really means is that faculty members and staff and administrators have been talking to each other on a systematic basis for about 15 years on what it takes for Long Beach students to succeed as you go from the K-12 to the community college to the CSU. Then just the fact that people are talking to each other intersegmentally has produced some pretty good results in terms of what faculty expect at every level. And so that kind of conversation needs to go on all across California and needs to be legislatively driven to produce the kind of clear pathways that we've been talking about here for the last 20 minutes.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I worked in after-school programming in middle schools in the area, Hamilton, Jefferson, Franklin, and those programs are being cut. The after-school programs, the music programs are being cut. Ones that I had access to since second grade are now really not available to maybe high school, even that. And I have a nephew who is 5 years old, and his kindergarten classes are getting cut. Where there were 6 teachers, there's now going to be 2 in the next 2 years. And the high schools, like Wilson High School, they're losing their extra classes that they've offered to be a classical high school. And so these are all things that are made available to the public. And as they're getting cut, how is it even going to be possible to distinguish if these students are going to be college ready or even, higher education ready? We're focused on higher education now, but at the same time, I feel that K-12 is seriously, suffering a huge hit. And if college is even going to be an option after you've been deprived of these extra, sources.
Well, I mean, I don't disagree with you. I mean, to have a conversation about the state's master plan, you have to include K-12 because we have to get students ready to participate in the higher education master plan. So college readiness is certainly an issue that's at the top of the chart throughout the country. President Obama, it's on the top of his list, Secretary Arne Duncan, Secretary of Education. The question becomes, I mean, we can all sit here and talk about what's not happening, but folks, you all are the voters. Okay? We can't disassociate ourselves from the problem. Okay, you all voted, I say you all, I don't mean you specifically, but you all voted to put everybody in prison. You all voted to provide social services to every single person in California. You all voted. You all want this. At some point, the state has to make decisions. What does it really want? And can it afford to do everything? That's a question. Yes, I mean, I see what's going on in Long Beach Unified, and I see how that's going to reflect on Long Beach City College. Because those students are ultimately going to come to our doorstep and need help. And are we going to be able to provide them that help? I hope we are. And ultimately, you have to go to those families and say, you cannot rely on the state of California to support your son or daughter. You better participate in their education. There's not an excuse to just say, I'm turning them over to the state of California. Whether or not they're successful, that's your business. No. You better take charge of that. So absolutely, the K-12 system is at the heart of this issue that we're talking about today. We have to do a better job of preparing our students to succeed from the time they enter school. And we've got to, as a state, to put a priority on that. And at this point in time, it's hard to see how that's going to happen, but that's where you all come into the picture. Somehow or another, we've got to gain that momentum.
Well, voters faced this before. California voters, this is exactly the problem that California voters faced in the late 50s. When they began to look at the situation in 57, 58, 59, what's the future for California? What's the global economy going to look like? What's the future like? And voters responded in a magnificent way by creating this master plan for higher education, which worked pretty well for a while. And so now we're at this critical point again. Actually, we've been there for about 10 or 12 years. We're in a situation where voters have to decide in California, what future do you want for this state? What future do you want for your children? And that's where we are right now. It's interesting, this has become coming at the 50th anniversary, the golden anniversary of this golden plan for the Golden State. And so now voters, again, we're going to have to decide what they want to do about this, whether we'll go backwards or whether we'll go forwards. And that's why the legislature has got to do more than simply review these plans. They reviewed these plans for seven times and made no structural changes. And this idea that there's an agency that would create oversight for these three systems is nonsense. CPEC doesn't do that job. All it does is issue critical reports. And so there has to be some kind of legislative-driven, voter-driven demand to change the way things are going right now.
Other questions?
Uh-oh.
It seems to me, based on this analysis that I'm hearing from the entire panel, that we face a situation where we as a community are fragmented, the legislature doesn't practice effective oversight or reform, and it seems very difficult to get changes through the existing legislative system. Has anyone considered an initiative that would change the Constitution, change the status of UC, redefine the status of CSU and the CCs and our public education system below it, so that we can approach the problem in the systematic way that really is the only rational way to try and solve the problem? Has that been considered at all? If you're aware.
What have you been smoking, Julian? I mean, that's yes. I mean, I've not heard of. I mean, certainly there's been a push for a constitutional convention to change the entire California Constitution. That has pretty much died a sad death, unfortunately, because you can't separate education from the rest of the state constitution. Education suffers partly because of the way the Constitution is set up and the way that the general fund has been established, whether it be Prop 13, whether it be Prop 98, all these initiatives that are all well-meaning have got us into a mess that we have a hard time extracting ourselves from. I think there has to be a constitutional solution. I agree with you, Julian. The problem is, how do you get there? Because I don't see how you can convince unions in higher education to go along with any major structural change unless you can find a way to make it in their interest to support it. Because the reality is, if you don't have major union support for any major initiative coming out of the legislature, you're not going to get it off the ground. Now, you can have another organization fund an initiative, as what was trying to happen with the Constitutional Convention and the push from the Bay Area, but again, there wasn't a lot of financial support. You need a lot of money to push an initiative in California. So somebody's got to pay for it. And as Mr. Hayden said, there aren't a lot of constituencies with money in education other than the unions.
Yes, ma'am.
This question is for the panel, but also for anyone in the room who knows more about politics than I do. I've been watching Meg Whitman's commercials, and her number 3 is fix the education system in California. Does she really, does anyone know anything about her plans to fix the education?
She hasn't released a plan yet.
My suggestion is that she gives me all the money she's putting into those commercials, and I'll help fix the system.
Yeah, we have a tradition of education presidents and education governors. It just doesn't seem to work out.
I was struck by the earlier comment that you made, or in your discussion of the history, that funding for UCLA, state funding now is roughly 20% of their total budget. 80% comes from outside. The golden rule: he who has the gold makes the rules. If the state is only funding 20% of the budget of UCLA, and I suspect that's similar for the other UC campuses, it's probably not their highest priority then to serve the kids in this room or the young people in this room that are trying to go there. And they may be on a different planet, UC, but for our community college students, that is, for many of them, a real goal and should be an attainable goal. And if it's only 20% coming from the state, I don't see, I mean, I'd like to hear your comment, but I don't see the incentive for the university really to make themselves particularly accessible to those folks.
Well, I don't know exactly how to answer that. Let me just say that I don't want to get into bashing University of California system.
Well, I'm not actually bashing
Yeah.
them, that's the reality.
The reality
That's
is,
how they're funded.
well, let me just say that the reality is that teaching is not the highest priority at the University of California. I have lots of good friends who teach at the University of California up and down the state. I visit them often, we talk. And it's pretty clear from those discussions and any other method you want to use that, education at our level is not really a high priority. If you send a freshman to UCLA, that fresh person will end up in a class, biology class or history class or an anthropology class of 250 students. That's not education. That's an educational solution to the problem that a lot of UC professors, all UC professors, are promoted on the basis of their research, and perhaps that's appropriate at that level. But the idea of teaching as the highest priority, that has never been the situation. The master plan in 1959 designated the fact that research would be the highest order of business for the University of California, and that teaching is the primary mission of the CSUs and the community colleges. And so, and he's exactly right. If 80% of your budget or 75% of your budget is coming from federal grants and other such sources, you're not going to have a lot of pressure to improve the quality of undergraduate education. Again, my point here is not to bash any of the UCs, but to really point out that they are continually under pressure to improve their quality of their undergraduate education. And based on the conversations I've had with my friends who work in that system, they are not rewarded for high quality undergraduate teaching. They're rewarded for research. And that's a problem they're going to have to solve at that level. So,
I agree with Craig. The issue is the incentives that we've created. The incentive that we've created at UC is, of course, every organization is organized around maximizing revenue. Okay, we're no different than the community college system. We maximize revenue by putting as many people in class by the third week of census. That's how we get paid. So we're organized around that. We do a wonderful job of getting people in here. UC, likewise, the incentive is to go out and find resources for your research effort, to highlight the university, to promote it. The incentive isn't to provide the best learning environment for your freshman and sophomore classes. I mean, you're basing your success on the fact that students who are coming in there have already self-selected as successful, and you're just trying to work with them. And there's also this argument now that's starting to pop up that undergraduate education is now beginning to subsidize graduate level education. So again, the universities, the incentive is to create these graduate programs, these alumni networks, to shoot for the highest ratings in U.S. News and World Reports, which may or may not have anything to do with what students learn in their freshman and sophomore year. But that's the incentive. That's not the faculty's fault. That's their survival.
Could you give us some insight into the relative levels of state funding for the three systems? You've got 20% for UC. How does it work for CSU and for the CCs?
Well, by virtue of its size, California Community Colleges obviously received quite a big chunk of funding. Now, people have to realize funding for community colleges doesn't come out of the higher education budget. Funding for community colleges comes out of Proposition 98. Proposition 98 sets aside a portion of the general fund for K through 14 education. The K-12 is supposed to receive 89%, community college is supposed to receive 11% of that funding. There's only been 1 year. Only been 1 year where community colleges received 10.9%. The closest we've ever been to 11%. Higher ed funding, though, as Mr. Hayes said, is for CSU and UC. Their per student funding, UC, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, is somewhere around 15,000. Probably
student.
even higher now per student. Community colleges are around 4,800. Huge difference. And to the point that was made earlier, it takes a lot more resources to prepare a student who comes here from all sorts of different walks of life to succeed than a student who is self-selected as a UC transfer student. Big difference. But again, our priorities are skewed. And then of course CSU is in the middle there, but still significantly more funding per student in higher education than community college students.
But it's not the case that 100% of the community college funding comes from the state. Aren't there other sources of funding, or am I wrong about that?
Well, I mean, it's probably about 80 some odd % comes from between Prop 98 and property tax. It comes from the general fund. I mean, just taking Long Beach City College as an example, there's probably about 12% of funding that doesn't come from the state, from federal sources, from local fees, but overwhelmingly, the majority of funding comes from the state general fund, and that's why we are so reliant on the ebbs and flows of the state economy. And our state economy, our state general fund, again, getting back to Proposition 13, is primarily funded by the top 5% of earners in the state of California. 5% of the earners in the state of California fund probably 80% of the general fund in the state of California. So when the economy goes to hell, guess what, folks? Our general fund goes to hell. Because that, after Prop 13, personal income tax became the primary source of funding for the general fund as opposed to property tax. Property tax tends to be more stable through bad economies. Personal income tax just goes up and down depending on how much capital gains there are. So no capital gains, no money. So it's sort of a tough spiral that we're in. So our budget's not going to improve until those top 5% of earners improve. So in some ways, we want them to do better under the current system so that we can get some money.
And when it comes to community college funding, let's not forget bake sales.
That works. And I apologize, I'm going to have to leave in about a minute.
Yes, I'll say something. Eloy, before you leave, I'm Professor Douglas in political science.
Yes.
I'm a colleague of Craig. This is a fabulous discussion. I'm just giving you an observation, and my observation is I've really only heard this type of substantive discussion on the crisis in California education when you're given a major address, either a college days address or perhaps a brown bag. So my sense is that we don't talk enough about it as an institution, and we don't talk enough about the college readiness side. Everybody's going to talk about the budget because nobody wants to have hard times.
Right.
And I know that as the college president, you have to deal with that. But my observation is, and maybe a request or even a pledge from you, is what can we do? And I would work with you. I would even task force for you if you asked me. What can we do to talk about it more on a college?
Right.
How are we going to get students through here? And technology is making it worse. What I'm saying is that cell phone technology in the classroom and every gadget you can imagine is making it worse. And the last 2 years has been a turning point. I used to talk about this when I came in 2000. Now everybody's talking about it. So I know what's going on. What do you think we can do?
I think that's a great question, and I wish it would be asked more often. But I think here at Long Beach City College, I mean, because it's sort of two issues. One, what we can do locally, and one, what we can do statewide. We've already talked about statewide. You've got to pay attention as a voter and start demanding more accountability for education in the legislature. Make it as important as that campaign contribution from the union or corporation. Locally, as professionals, we have a faculty senate. There's the chief right there. I think you need to demand that conversation start happening more at the Senate. I certainly have it with the Senate, but we have an organization in academia that we try to continue to respect and honor until it's not producing the results that we need it to produce. Long Beach City College is far ahead of probably 80% of California community colleges in terms of that conversation. And that probably makes you sort of sad because we still have a long way to go. But it needs to have more urgency. We need to really focus on this issue. I mean, we talk about accreditation and student learning outcomes, and we get so tied up with control and who's telling us what to do. And we need to just get over who's telling us what to do and focus on what we need to do for the right reasons and quit with all the conspiracy theories. And there may be some conspiracies. I'm not saying that there aren't. There may be some people in D.C. who want to see faculty tenure go away or who want to see colleges be funded solely on performance. That may be. I'm not going to dismiss that. But the reality is we don't deal with why the public is getting upset, which is students are not transferring, they're not completing their degrees, they don't care why, they just want to know what we're going to do about it. We need to have that conversation, much louder conversation. And it really begins with the organizations we have in place, whether it be the planning process, the Senate. I welcome that conversation. And if you have an idea on how I fast forward it, I'm all ears. And I want to thank, before I leave, I want to thank Julian, Paul Savoy, Craig Hendricks, Kevin, the entire Political Science and History Department for pulling this together. This is a great conversation. We need to have it more often. We lose sight of it because we're so buried and focused on day-to-day that we lose sight of what's happening in California. So I congratulate you all. This is exactly what our faculty should be engaged in, which is heightening the awareness of our students and hopefully making some change in California. So thank you all. I look forward to the next one. I'll leave you with the best panelists.
Yeah.
All right. Well, again, I want to thank all the panelists for an amazing job. Good to see you. And thanks to everybody who did all the setup. We really appreciate it. Cameramen, everybody, we really appreciate it. And thank you all for coming and participating. So, it was great.